Hey y'all, and welcome back to another video. I'm so glad that you decided to click into this video today because, as you can tell by the title, I'm going to be speaking on the topic of worrying. And obviously worry, fear, doubt, these are things that all of us as humans deal with pretty much on an everyday basis, whether it be something really small and trivial or something a lot more serious. And I realize that worry can, again, go from a pretty small level to a really serious problem like anxiety. And I just don't have the time in this video today to devote to discussing anxiety in general, because that is kind of a topic of its own that deserves a lot more discussion around it. So just to be clear, this video today is going to be more focused on just day-to-day worries that we have as humans and how we can implement practices in our lives and ask ourselves questions to keep things in perspective and not worry as often. And a few years ago, I realized that there were some Bible verses I had read about worrying that I just never really took to heart, and I finally took the time to really study them and fully, devote myself to believing them and putting them into practice in my life. And along with doing that, following those verses, as well as just asking myself some specific questions each time I begin to worry about something, I've noticed that I really have struggled so much less with worrying. And that doesn't mean that I don't worry about things. Of course, I still worry about small things, big things, whatever they may be. But when I put these things into practice, I just am not as weighted down by my worry as I used to be. And obviously, humans for thousands of years have been dealing with worry and fear and doubts, because if you read the Bible, God said over and over and over again to his people, do not fear, do not fear, do not fear. He has given us so many words of wisdom around this topic specifically. And so I think that we can take a little comfort in that, knowing that people for years and years and years have all dealt with this worry. I think it's just part of our human nature. But fortunately, we can turn to God in his sovereign nature and in the peace that he offers us, and know that we don't have to live under the weight of our worry. We can turn to him, and he wants to take all of that from us. So like with all of my videos, my prayer today is just that the Holy Spirit would speak through me, and that you guys would be impacted by the verses that I read from, and that hopefully some of these pointers that I give you will really benefit you in the worries that you have in your life. And just to be clear, this is not something that we can just tackle on our own as humans. I fully believe that we need the power of the Lord in our hands to overcome these. And to be quite honest, I don't know how people who don't know the Lord ever overcome any kind of worry or fear or doubt that they have. I heard someone else say once that they don't know how anyone without the Lord wouldn't be anxious or depressed or afraid all the time, because this world is just such a broken place, truly. But as Christians, we know that we have so much hope to look forward to. So just a little side note that this is not something that I think you can just do all the right steps and tackle on your own. You fully will need the guidance and direction of the Lord to accomplish this. So let me pull out my notes that I've got over here. Basically, I have 3 pointers that I want to mention, and they are prayer, perspective, and plan. And I know that that sounds so cheesy with the alliteration of all the P's, but to be honest, it just worked out that way. Okay, I promise I didn't plan it. All right, so number 1 that we're going to start with is prayer. And the verse that kind of has inspired this whole video and just this topic in my life in general is from Philippians. Let me pull it out. This is the verse that once I fully began to believe it, I really saw a transformation in my life and how I deal with worry. So this is from Philippians 4, verses 6 through 7. You've probably heard it before. It says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." If you have never read that verse before or studied it before, I would highly encourage you to pause this video and just go read it over and over and over again, because it's easy to just read it and say, oh yeah, that's nice. God tells us not to worry. He tells us to just, pray, and he will give us his peace. But I don't think that we fully understand the weight of this. Paul is telling us not to be anxious about anything. Anything, not to be anxious about anything small, not to be anxious about anything big. He says in every single situation, by prayer and petition, to make our requests made known to God. So this makes it pretty easy. My first step anytime I am worried about anything, whether it be something big or small, is to pray about it. And sometimes I will find myself skipping ahead to step 3, which is plan, because I'm just a natural planner oftentimes. And when I skip over the prayer stage of this, that is when I notice that my worry, my fear, my anxiousness all will start to pick up. And so for me, I have to make sure that prayer is the number one step. Going along with prayer, I always try to include gratitude in every single prayer that I pray. Even the prayers that I pray about the most worrisome things that I have going on in my life, if I can look at the situation and find something good to pray for, something to thank God for, something to be grateful about, that really keeps my thoughts in perspective for me, which I'll get into perspective in just a second. But in this section, Paul says that by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, we present our requests to God. And it's easy to have the with thanksgiving part and any other time when life is good and dandy, but this is a verse talking about how when we're anxious about something, we still need to pray with thanksgiving. And that kind of goes hand in hand with another verse that I want to talk about, which is from James, and this is another pretty common one. You may have heard it before. This is James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. It says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." So this verse in James is talking about whenever we encounter trials in our life. And I think that trial and worry can go hand in hand. Whenever we go through a trial, we are likely to be worried. And this verse is kind of the opposite of what we would naturally do as humans. It's telling us to consider it a pure joy whenever we face these trials. And so I think coming into this step number 1 of prayer with an attitude and a posture of thankfulness and joy for our trials, as crazy as it may sound, that is like the hardest thing to get over. But I will say that I'm a big believer that you can see something good in every situation. So even when I have a problem, like let's say I'm worried about something with work, I can come into this prayer with the mindset of being grateful that I have a job to worry over. Or if you are worried about someone who is sick, you can come into that prayer being grateful that God has given you that person in your life that you love so much. If you're worried about, paying rent on your house or something like that, you can be grateful that you have a house to begin with to pay rent on. So that's part 1 of the gratitude, just knowing that we can see something good if we look hard enough in every situation, because we know that God is in every situation. And the second part of having gratitude is knowing that these trials that we face, the worries that come in our life, are all going to produce a perseverance in us. Like James says, when the perseverance finishes its work, we will be mature and complete in our faith. And so we can be confident that going through these worries, we are going to learn more about God. We're going to just become more mature believers in our walk with the Lord. So again, 2 parts to that gratitude element. 1, we can see if we look hard enough. We can see good in every situation. And 2, we know that these trials are going to produce perseverance in us and ultimately make our faith stronger. So I know that this first point of prayer has been pretty long already. I promise this is going to be the longest point that I have, but the first part of prayer, again, is gratitude, and then the second part of prayer is to seek wisdom from the Lord. So I'm also going to read from James again. This is continuing on in verse 5. He says, "If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. So the first verse from Philippians that changed my whole perspective on this is when I fully comprehended I don't need to worry or be anxious about anything. Every single situation I have, I can turn it in prayer to the Lord. And then I would say that this was one of those other super impactful verses for me, knowing that when we believe that God will give us the wisdom, He will. And I'm not necessarily going to get into discerning God's will or knowing what God's wisdom or will for us is. That would just be way too much to talk about today, maybe in another video. But this verse just really has hit me, knowing that in any situation, if I am unsure of what to do or if I'm worried about something, I can pray to the Lord, ask Him for wisdom, believe in my heart that He will give it to me, that He will lead me in the right direction, and He will do that. But the key to this is that we can't doubt, or it says we will be like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed like the wind. So coming into this situation of prayer with a heart of gratitude and also with the full confidence that God can give us the wisdom we need to get through the situation. Oh man, I feel like this is going to be a long video today, so I hope y'all are up for it. If you've made it this far, good job. Only 2 points left. All right, the second point that I have after prayer is to keep everything in perspective. I am sometimes a dramatic person, but most of the time I really try my best to be a very realistic person, and so keeping it in perspective is something that will just really bring me back down to earth, keep me level-headed, because oftentimes when we're feeling worried or anxious about something, we allow our emotions to just completely take over our thoughts and our mind and our heart, and it's easy to just drown in a spiral of our thoughts. And so keeping things in perspective, being realistic about the situation is always helpful for me. So there are 2 questions that I like to ask myself, and normally after I have prayed about it, I instantly feel better. You know, I'm feeling comforted. But these 2 questions also typically, when I'm honest about the answers to them, they just keep things in perspective. And let me quickly mention that I am not saying any of this to discredit the feelings that anyone has. I'm not trying to take away from the fact that there are very serious things we can be worried about and things that can lead to fear in people's life. I'm not trying to discredit that one bit, but I do think that when it comes to these often more trivial matters, it's easy, especially speaking as a woman, it's easy to let our thoughts just completely spiral and to start thinking worst case scenarios in every situation, and to really start to drown in the weight of our thoughts. And so that's why I think that keeping these things in perspective will just begin to sort of dissolve any of that worry we have when we remind ourselves that this situation is not the end of the world, that it's going to be okay. So here are the 2 questions that I like to ask myself. First, how long will this matter? Second, who all does this affect? And the first question is typically, once I realize the answer to it, this is typically what kind of like takes me off the ledge and makes me realize everything's going to be okay. Most of the time when I'm worried about something, it will maybe matter for like the next couple days. Let's say I'm really worried about, I'm not in school anymore, but thinking back to when I was in school, if I was really worried about a project I had coming up or a huge exam, okay, how much longer is this one exam going to matter? Well, maybe it'll affect my grades this semester. Okay, maybe it'll affect my GPA. But as someone who has now graduated and sees what it's like to apply to jobs, I can tell you pretty confidently that your GPA is really not as important as you think it's going to be. Keeping in mind the length of time that something is actually going to even be present in our lives. If it's something small, like, you know, something embarrassing that happened at an event or something, asking myself, who all is going to remember this tomorrow? Okay, maybe a couple people. Who's going to remember this next week? Maybe someone will. How about next month? 6 months, a year. Once you get farther and farther down the line, you realize that so many things just aren't going to matter anymore. and maybe they will be stuck inside your mind, but they aren't stuck inside anyone else's mind. Which brings me to the second question. Who all does this situation affect? Typically, if it's something that is just a small little personal thing that I have, like if I got embarrassed about something, I realize, okay, I am the only one that this is affecting. I don't need to be worrying about it like it's the most important thing in the world. Now, if it's something that affects my friends or multiple family members or someone that I work with, then I would treat it with a little bit more of a serious tone. However, if it's something that isn't going to matter a few weeks or months from now, if it doesn't affect anyone else besides me, I can breathe a little bit more easily knowing that it is less important than I probably think it is. Again, not trying to discredit something and say that none of our worries are important. However, perspective is such a blessing. And I actually just finished reading a book by Jenny Allen. What was that book called? It's sitting right behind me. It's called Get Out of Your Head, and it's kind of about taking our thoughts captive and being transformed by the renewal of our minds. And I thought about filming a video on that topic because I found the book pretty helpful and have noticed that it's helped me in my thought life already. So let me know if y'all would be interested in that and just how to not let your thoughts spiral. But there is a verse I wanted to read really quickly relating to perspective, just because I want y'all to know that these aren't my thoughts. I really try to pull as much as I can from the Bible because this is not my own wisdom by any means. And this verse is from 2 Corinthians chapter 4, starting in verse 16. It says, "Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." And I love that reminder that everything that we can see around us is temporary, it's fleeting, it is momentary, but the unseen is what is eternal, and that is ultimately where we can place our hope. So the biggest perspective to keep in mind is that all of this is temporary. Someday we will all be taken from this earth, and none of our small little worries here are going to matter anymore. And I think having that sort of eternal mindset and perspective is what can sober anyone down from any kind of worrisome thought that they may have. All right, so that was point number 2, perspective, and now I just have one more, which is number 3, and that is plan. And I don't have a ton to say around this. I do have a couple of verses that I want to read in a minute, but really the purpose behind the plan portion of this is that I think when we sit and dwell in our worry, it's so much easier to just, it's like sitting in a tank of water and just letting the worry come and drown us. And sometimes all we need to do is stand up and go do something. We need to put a plan into action. We can't just sit in our thoughts and let them encapsulate us. We need to be able to step out of the worry and be actionable in what we're going to do to resolve the situation, because oftentimes with worry, there is something that we can actionably do in our lives to set the situation straight. There isn't always something we can do. You know, sometimes we have to just wait on something, like if we're waiting to hear back about something, there's not necessarily anything you can do there, but oftentimes there are things we can do to resolve situations. And if you read the book of Proverbs, it just talks a lot about the idle person versus the hardworking and diligent person, and the Bible really does have a lot to say about people who are hardworking and who are diligent in what they do versus the people who are lazy and idle and don't take action with their lives. So in the situations where we can take action, I think it is important to do that. And so looking at plans, again, there are sort of 2 points under the plan category. I feel like I need to have a full-on outline of this because I just have so many little bullets I'm going off of. Within the category of plan, A, we can be confident that God has a plan. And I know you hear that all the time, and if you're super worried about something, people have probably told that to you before, maybe you've thought it yourself. But I think the most comforting thing is knowing that we don't go through anything without God ordaining it without it being a part of his plan for our lives. He knows exactly what we're worrying about. He knows what we're walking through, and the Bible tells us that he won't test us past beyond what we can bear. So we know that he has us walking through this season for a reason. So, A, we can be confident in his plan. Jeremiah 29:11, I'm sure you all have heard this one before. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. So that kind of goes back to the verse in James that we looked at where we know we can come confidently to the Lord. So when we seek him with all our heart, it says we will find him. And it also says he knows the plans he has for us. And I don't really want to pull either of these verses out of context, but they both are just such great verses, obviously. So another one is from Romans 8. This is verse 28. We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And then it goes on to talk about predestination, which is a whole nother topic to tackle. But we know that in all things, not in all good things, but in all things, God works for the good of those who love him and who have been called according to his purpose. So if you are a child of God, you know every single thing he is working out for your good and for his glory. So there's part one of the plan. We can be confident in the plan that God has for us. Part two of the plan is knowing that we can be diligent and we can be active and put steps in place that we need to make progress. So something that I always like to ask myself is, have I done everything I can to resolve this situation? If there are still lingering things here and there that I know I could do to make an impact or lessen the severity of the situation, I need to take action and do those things. I can't just sit idly by and let the situation go on and say that I tried everything I could if I know that there is more that could be done to the situation. Alrighty, so those were the 3 points I had: prayer, perspective, and plan. I hope that y'all found this video helpful. I truly put a lot of thought and intention into the verses that I was sharing, and I will honestly say that putting these things into practice in my life over the past few years truly has made a difference for me. So maybe if you are still finding yourself super worried about things, you can go back through in this video, take down those notes, or just remember those 3 P's and really put them into practice in your life. Pray, keep everything in perspective, and remember that God has a plan and that you can take action in that plan as well. If you have a friend or a family member, someone that you know that is worrying about something right now, or that just tends to worry about everything, to be a worrywart, as they say. I haven't said that in so long, but my grandmother used to always say she was a worrywart because she would worry about all the many little things in her life going on. That just made me think of her. But if you know someone who worries a lot, maybe you can forward them this video or just share with them these points, share with them these verses, let them know that there is wisdom to be found in the Bible. We have it there given to us for a reason. And it's crazy that when you start to actually believe and put into practice what it says, the transformation that can take place. It's truly incredible. God is good. If you made it to the end of this video, congratulations. You have a good attention span, and I'm thankful that you watched all the way to the end. Let me know if this sparked any other video ideas that you guys would like to see. I always love hearing from you, so if you want to comment something down below, I would appreciate that, and we'll be sure to respond to you. And again, I hope and pray that you all enjoyed this video, found it encouraging, and will put it to practice in your own lives. And with all that being said, this was probably the longest video I have filmed in so many weeks, months, years, everything. But I hope y'all enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Bye!